Tiny houses are all the rage these days. They appeal to young adults who want more financial freedom, middle-agers looking to downsize, and recent retirees wanting a simpler life. They also attract renters and travelers who are environmentally conscious and want to reduce their eco-footprint. If stats are an indication of how popular tiny homes are, a 2020 survey found that more than half, or 56% of Americans, would consider living in a tiny house, and 86% of non-homeowners would consider buying a tiny home for their first home. The reasons they gave were affordability, efficiency, eco-friendliness, and a minimalist lifestyle. But what about tiny house Airbnbs? How popular are they? Well, travelers were already craving unique stays before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and these included tiny homes, yurts, and tree houses. According to Airbnb, small, simplistic, and efficient spaces like shepherd's huts and tiny homes trended up 112% and 85% respectively from 2019 to 2020. There were around 14,000 tiny homes listed on Airbnb in 2019. Last year, that number jumped up to 24,000.
Okay, why are there so many?
So is it a good idea to rent out a tiny house on Airbnb? Well, this 25-year-old made $860,000 in revenue from his Waco, Texas tiny house last year. And this guy spent $17,000 in 2019 to build a tiny house in Idaho and now makes $49,600 a year on Airbnb. And then there's this dude who put 2 tiny houses in his Oakland, California yard as an easy way to make cash, and now they're his primary source of income. So should you invest in tiny houses? Well, let's look at some of the pros and cons. Pro number 1, low risk, cheap cost of entry. Investing in an Airbnb tiny home is one of the cheapest ways to start a vacation rental business. You can buy or build a tiny home for a fraction of the price of other types of real estate. The average price of a tiny house is $52,000, which is 87% cheaper than the average price normal sized home. Lower upfront costs means smaller down payments and lower monthly mortgage payments. That makes tiny homes a great choice for folks wanting to get into the market without putting down a lot of money. In fact, a lot of tiny homes start out as DIY projects. If you live in an area with lots of tourist traffic and have extra space in your backyard, then building and renting out a tiny home can be a great way to be able to make some extra money. Pro number 2, potentially higher ROIs. Tiny homes are definitely a trend, and people will pay a good price to stay in them just to see what it's like. According to Airbnb, tiny homes are the top grossing unique space type. They took the top spot in 2021 with more than 2.5 million nights booked. Tiny house hosts earn a combined total of more than $195 million just in that year alone. These mini houses have a special draw because of their novelty and charm, and Airbnb guests like staying at Instagrammable places, and tiny homes are right up that alley. They can be configured in the most extraordinary styles and shapes. You can craft them out of shipping containers, sheds, shepherd's huts, trains, or even an old school bus. And they don't necessarily have to be sitting on the ground either. Tree houses and houseboats also classify as tiny homes. It's their novelty that gives you the potential to make a higher rental income. Just look at how big the tiny home market is right now. The size of the tiny home market is forecasted to increase by $4.1 million and is expected to see a year-on-year growth of 4% this year alone. Pro number 3, easier to operate. A small house is just easier to build and manage. You have fewer interior and exterior spaces to organize and clean, and you don't have to repair as many appliances. Turnovers are also going to be simpler and quicker. At the same time, you don't have to go overboard with amenities. With the money that you save on indoor features, you can spend a little bit more on outdoor living areas. You can add things like a patio, a hot tub, swing, or a fire pit for making s'mores. And it'll cost you less to integrate technology into them. A single smart thermostat or smart speaker is enough to cover the whole house. Pro number 4, they're environmentally friendly. Tiny homes use a lot less construction material. There are fewer things to maintain, and they use less energy to heat and cool, and they just save you a lot more money in general. You can even expect your utility costs to go down as low as $40 a month. Tiny homes are also reported to leave 45% environmental impact than regular homeowners do. Pro number 5, quick setup and portability. Tiny homes can be made in just a short period of time. They can be built on-site or off, and many are modular or prefabricated, made entirely in factories. So your business can be up and running in less than 2 months. And because many tiny homes are on wheels, you can also relocate them into the market where Airbnb rules might be more in your favor in case of changing regulations that might work against your favor. Or you could even find a spot that has better scenery.
Wow, That's beautiful.
Pro number 6, fewer bad guests. Due to their small size, tiny homes aren't appealing to problem guests. It'd be a little challenging to throw a party when only 2 people can comfortably fit in the space.
I can't go to the party's over.
But with all these pros, we do have to talk about some of the cons to owning a tiny home. Con number 1, zoning and permitting issues. Figuring out the zoning and permitting rules can be the most challenging part of starting a tiny home business on Airbnb. And in most states, you'll need a building permit to set one up. You'll also need to follow the HOA rules or homeowner association rules, building codes, and zoning ordinances, just like you have to when building a regular sized home. In many places, tiny homes are considered accessory dwelling units or ADUs and need to be registered as such. In others, tiny homes on wheels or THOs are classified as recreational vehicles and are subject to the same rules as an RV. They won't be registered as a regular home. Some counties limit how many nights you can sleep in an RV. For example, you might not be able to camp more than 5 nights in a row. Other areas require tiny homes and RVs to park in only designated spaces like a mobile home park. So you're going to need to find out the local building codes and zoning ordinances in your area. But many states do allow people to build and rent tiny homes. And you can pause the video. I'm going to include all the states that allow them here. Con number 2, lower resale value. Now, I'm only talking about tiny homes on wheels. They're the ones that are often underestimated because they're movable and they aren't attached to the ground. Those are classified as personal property, not real estate. Because when it comes to property appraisals, things like land value, size, improvements, market demand, and depreciation are given top consideration. And those do depreciate much like cars. They don't appreciate over time like normal homes do. For example, a mobile home will lose about 3.5% of its value each year. And in 6 years, a tiny mobile home bought for $50,000 could be worth just $41,000. And you'd have an even harder time reselling it because it's built on a trailer that hasn't been moved in probably quite a few years. So if you don't have a permanent plot of land to accompany your THO, you'd be at a disadvantage. But if you build a tiny cottage or an ADU, the kind that are built with real foundations and are set in your backyard, for example, those are considered real estate and part of your property. In fact, homes with ADUs can raise their resale value as much as 50%.
That's a staggering amount of money.
Con number 3, limited financing. It's more or less the same when it comes to getting financing. Not many banks will agree to home loans for THOs because they're not seen as viable dwelling places. Your tiny home will unlikely be able to qualify for a standard 25-year residential mortgage. Also, home loans aren't structured to accommodate small amounts of money. You'd probably have to take out an RV or personal loan to finance a THO. For an ADU though, you may be able to get help through a cash out refinance, home equity line of credit, construction loan, government grant programs, or even your credit card. Whichever way, make sure that you have a good business plan ready so you can get loan officers and investors on your side. And I do have another video on YouTube where I talk about how to be able to create your Airbnb business plan.
Click it.
Con number 4, specialized maintenance. Some of the maintenance for a tiny home can require specialized care compared to an average vacation rental. Take the bathroom, for example. In a normal vacation rental, you'd have standard plumbing installed. Most tiny homes, however, though, have compost toilets, foot pedal sinks, and different types of water supply systems that can take a lot of effort to oversee.
It's complicated.
So make no mistake that tiny homes are small in size, but they pack a punch when it comes to revenue. Set in the right place and geared towards the right market, they can bring you a sizable ROI that a traditional rental won't. Take advantage of the rising demand for small living spaces and profit off of it. There's lower costs involved and a lot less risk. Tiny homes can also just be a great way for first-time vacation rental owners. But you might be questioning if right now is the right time to get started with Airbnb when everybody is talking about this Airbnb bust. Now, I don't know about you, but it's really hard to believe what people are saying nowadays with all this fake news. So that's why we dive into the data to find out if the Airbnb bust is real or fake.